afternoon, everybody. If you'd like to take a seat. How are you? Oh, I know, this dress is 20 years old. It's my vintage. My mum made it for me 20 years ago, literally. Yeah, I just dug it out. Don't put that on Facebook.
You're live already. So.
Am I really? Yes. Am I right to go? No, not quite.
No, you're live.
I am live. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elise Hatton, and I'm the Smart Hub Business Manager. Rockhampton Regional Council is very focused on supporting our entrepreneurs and our local business people. And one of the ways in which we demonstrate this support is by hosting these monthly Lunch and Learn events. So I recognize a lot of you, so thank you very much for returning to our Lunch and Learn events. And if this is your first time, we hope that this will become a regular recurrence for you to join us. So what we do is we usually try and pick topics that are very relevant to our business community and helpful to talk about. And that's what we did today. We are going to talk about the threats out there and about cybersecurity. And we have two local experts to share their knowledge and expertise with us. Now, what I usually don't do when I introduce the speakers is to repeat what you've already read on the marketing. You know Peter Van Heck and Paul Laurie, and I know that you've read everything about them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share two quirky facts, or a quirky fact about each. So, and let me tell you, when you ask someone to tell you a quirky fact about themselves, that's pretty like, I don't know, I have nothing quirky, I'm very normal. Paul said, that's quirky enough, right? My marketing's quirky enough, and it really is. But Peter is now known, he's made his way up in the world, he's getting a lot of flack about the fact that he is now known as the technology guru due to his fortnightly radio spot on Wednesdays at 9:45 a.m. on ABC Radio. So if you want to follow a little bit more and talk about tech and hear Peter talk about tech, 9:45 every second Wednesday is this is not tomorrow, next Wednesday, ABC Radio. And Paul still plays on his Game Boy. That's his quirky fact. So without any further ado, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge about cybersecurity.
Thanks, Lisa. I think that's the first time I've ever been asked for a quirky fact. IT people generally are very quirky at the beginning, so I don't wear that tech guru badge with pride. It's one of the things that I've kind of inherited due to the relationship we have with the agency. I think my title was just too long, so they cut it down. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about, we've certainly spent some time with the local business community already around cybersecurity, and it's really an awareness opportunity for Paul and I to come and talk to people just like you, hey, just to say, hey, don't forget cybersecurity, stuff is bad out there, it's getting bigger, it's getting worse, and we've got a few ideas about what you can do about that. You don't need to be at a university scale, or you don't need to be a real tech guru over here to be able to manage and deal with those kind of things. But it's just some good practical advice and good things to actually limit your exposure. So cybersecurity, those threats that we're talking about, they're just like lightning because they can actually strike from anywhere or at any time. There's no real plan or pain to this. It can be as genuinely out of the blue as a lightning strike. So I thought some of the things that we'll cover in here, threat landscape, I want to throw a few slides up just to give you a picture of what's actually, what we're seeing worldwide. It's really not meant to scare you, it's meant to show you the volume of stuff that's out there. What do we do about this? How are we going to manage this? Why are threats increasing? We get this question a lot, and you'll see this in the slides about why. You can see a trend line, and then what we can actually do about it. So this has come from a data source that's on the internet at the moment. It's available there. Everybody can go and check this out for yourselves. What you're really looking at there, timelines across the bottom, the bigger the size of the bubble, the more volume of accounts have been breached. So I don't expect you to go through all that, but if you kind of put a trend line through there, you can see over time, it's certainly getting more frequently and much larger. And these are account breaches. So what I thought I'd do is we have a bit of fun with this one. So I've picked the top 5 for the last 5 years. Some people will immediately recognise some of these companies and organisations out there, a lot of online presence. Most people pick up this one down here. This is Ashley Madison. I can see everybody nodding and smiling, so everybody knows that's the adult matchmaking service that's available. That still runs even though they had a huge big data breach. And then you can actually see, so the colours are actually coded by year, so all of the green you can see up the top there, that's all happened in 2019. The size of the bubble indicates the amount as well. So we're going to move into now, how do we actually manage this? And getting back to and staying in the theme of lightning, you know, you can't prevent lightning from happening. It's one of those things that is going to happen to us at any time, and cyber threats are exactly the same way. We can't do a lot about that, but we can certainly influence the outcome. So here's a couple of, the idea really is threats come from three places. They either come from a technology, some processes, or the people. You'll notice that people's in the middle of that because frankly the insider threat is probably one of the biggest things that leads to data breaches. And I'm talking about people accidentally doing something wrong, not aware of what they're doing, clicked on a link, and then they've exposed an organisation, a small business all the way to a large organisation. These kind of things happen right through to the malicious side of that too. So technology, we're talking about really simple things like patching your mobile phone, patching your computer, updating it when Windows says update or Mac says, does a nice little flash down the bottom, time to update. Those are the kind of simple things we do. And then make sure we've got some processes in place about how we onboard new people into our organisation, how we exit people from our organisation, make sure their access is removed. Paul's got some great stories around this, and I won't cover them. I'll let him talk through those. But there's some really obvious places that these threats come from. If we look at this here, and this is really a simple matrix to help people understand what we're talking about here. The spot in the middle where everything crosses over, that's actually our risk. So if you imagine your business in this context, you know, your threats are the things that are coming in. You've got vulnerabilities out there as well. We know that technology has vulnerabilities, people have vulnerabilities. Guess what? People are human, they make mistakes. And then it's about the exposure that we have. So understanding what kind of exposure you have against the risks. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll drill down about how you can actually put that into practice. So if we're looking at this slide here, this is a bit of a model that we've put together. And if we look at assets, we know that the assets within an organisation or our business are the same. It's the things that we value, it's the things that we want to protect, it's the IP, it's the monetary value, it's whatever it happens. That's actually not changing. Hopefully it'll grow over time because that's what every good business plan has. The threats, we've already seen that we're growing here. That's not going away either. In fact, if anything, the volume and the amount of breaches is getting higher. So we know that that's not going to change. Now, if we want to actually change the outcome, if we want a better experience, the only thing we can really do is look at the exposure. Where are we exposed? And that's the thing that we can influence. So this really is about focusing on what we can do to change that outcome. So if we can influence what those threats are and how we deal with those threats and what happens to them, we can certainly manage a different outcome. So I'll put this little example together. So forgive me about my poor graphics here really. So if that's our asset, this can be whatever it is in your mind right now. If you're running a business and you've got an idea on what your value is and what the assets are within your business, that's what this golden egg's all about. That threat over there is a cybersecurity threat. In fact, it's actually an artist's rendition of the Zika virus. Now, if we do nothing, literally do nothing, remember the slide before where we were talking about the model? If we do not actually look at and try to influence the outcome, that's what will happen. That Zika virus will break in and take our assets, either destroy them or take them. But if we actually change that dynamic and actually influence our exposure, put in a firewall in this case, we can actually get a different result. So we can actually change the outcome. So that's what that model looks like in practice. So why are threats increasing? Paul and I get this question a lot. A lot of people ask us this all the time. What's the important value here? Why does this continually happen? Why do we see so much change in this space? And it's really simple. It's about money. absolutely about money. The cyber criminals out there can actually make a lot more money from doing cyber criminal activities than they can from doing old-fashioned breaking in and stealing in terms of the volume of money they can do. And the things that we understand is cyber criminals are much better resourced than we are, they're much more patient than we are, and they have much more training and expertise than we do as well. So the other thing, we've seen a lot of this with a lot of the data breaches that happen, especially in things like Facebook. We've heard about Cambridge Analytica. You can actually change the way people think. You can influence significant events. You can influence elections. We potentially saw that happen in America, because I'm live here, I've got to be careful what I say. And then cyber warfare is much cheaper than the real thing. So we actually see that there's plenty of significant nation states out there who are interested in valuable IP. We're certainly seeing other nation states using cyber warfare to attack and attack utility services. Certainly we've seen that in some of the Asian countries already. So what to do? Now I've put this one up here and I'm going to skip through these really quickly because frankly Paul does a really good session on passwords, so we'll leave that to him. And what can we do about preventing the lightning? How can we influence the outcome that we want to get? So these are the recommendations I want to leave you with you. Really understand what your business risks are. Do not waste a lot of time trying to mitigate and protect against a huge amount of things. It really is a waste of your time. It's a waste of valuable money and investment dollars. Really focus and understand what your risks are. If you understand what your business risks are and you know exactly where you're vulnerable, that's what you should be putting your time and energy into. Focus on patching and prevention. I mentioned this before, but one of the best things we can do is keep our devices up to date. I'm talking about your mobile phones. Grab them out, have a look at the settings, go into general, update them, make sure they're up to date. It's an easy thing to do. Set on auto patching, auto updating as a feature. Sometimes you'll get it wrong, but most of the time it can actually make a huge difference in how you do that. The same thing applies for applications. When you can update an application, you should. And then have a plan. So we talked about that model before. Literally once you have those business risks, you've identified those, then it gives you an opportunity to know exactly what you should be focused on. And once you've got that plan in place, you're actually ready. You're actually able to influence the outcome. You can actually make a real difference in your business and your organisation. So with this slide, instead of questions now, I might hand over to Paul and then we can answer them all together.
As a backup. Cool. This is all good?
Yeah, it's good.
G'day everyone, thanks for coming to our session. So we do have a little bit of overlap between what Pete said and what I've said, which is good because it's probably just reinforcing some valuable stuff. So I'm Paul Laurie. I'm involved with Consulting One. We do business IT around Central Queensland, Rockhampton, Gladstone and Emerald mostly. And you might recognise Mac Choice more than you recognise Consulting One. We're the Apple reseller and repair agent, again for most of Central Queensland. So within the context of organisations, I do work with a lot of customers of all sorts of different sizes, right from little startups with one person in them operating by themselves from home, up to larger organisations with hundreds and hundreds of people. So my exposure to different kinds of security concerns, different tolerances around risk is pretty broad. So I guess what I'm trying to cover here is just the basics to get us started. Unfortunately, due to the time limits, we can't go into all the aspects that even scratching the surface on password management, really, because it's just such a big topic. So we'll zoom through, and then no doubt there'll be some questions at the end that we can drill down into. So again, without trying to be alarmist around the situation with cyber threats, we want to be informed, of course, but we shouldn't be terrified of the kind of stuff that's going on, because some very simple things that we can do can really mitigate those risks. According to the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman, I won't say that again, small businesses are a target of 43% of cybercrime. That's probably a really complex situation and understanding of why that's the case, and it's a combination of those small businesses not knowing how to react in the situation where there's, where they're asking for money in exchange for handing your data back and not having IT support and potentially having a different set of parameters around how they're managing passwords and security in their organisation. Threats can come in a whole bunch of different forms, and Pete talked about a lot of those. The common ones that we'll see all the time and that you'll hear about on the news are the malware. Malware being software that finds its way onto your machine through some other method. For example, if you go to a website or open what you think's a PDF in an email, it can launch some malware, which is just some software that runs on your computer, and because it's software running on your computer, it can pretty much do whatever it wants. Ransomware attacks can come multiple different ways, again through web browsers or through emails or fake communications from suppliers and vendors. There's all sorts of other different means that are, malware and ransomware and other scams are coming through all the time. There's a lot of incentive for these guys to really innovate in that area and find new ways to trick us. So the Australian government's reported the average cost of a cyber attack in business is about $276,000. You can imagine there's a lot of small dollar ones balanced out by some absolutely enormous ones as well to arrive at that number. Small businesses make attractive targets because they have less secure networks than big corporations, and it's become easier for hackers to carry out those automated attacks, particularly when they can click a few buttons and launch an attack on a list of a couple of 100,000 businesses. Are we prepared? This organisation here conducted a fairly extensive survey which can be found on the internet. It's quite a long white paper. It found that 43% of all organisations really aren't recognising threats before they become a compromise, and that rather disturbingly 51% of those only found out a breach after customers tell them about it. So if the website's been taken down or attacked, or if someone's sending out documents that look just like your invoices with a different bank account number on it, for instance, you might not know about that until a customer informs you. So just a few stats here I put together on the numbers. 43% of cybercrimes targeted the small business, as we said, and 60% of those businesses, very alarmingly, who experience a breach go out of business within 6 months. So if you just imagine yourself in the situation where potentially you've lost all your accounting data, it becomes very difficult to lodge BASs, to pay employees, accounts receivable, accounts payable, etc., let alone all your customer contact details and other stuff. It's just it's unimaginable how you might continue if you just lose everything. Particularly we rely on email more and more. Imagine you've lost your email. So inside threats, again, without turning paranoid on the people that are working for us, there's lots of reasons why there might be threats inside our organisations, whether there's malice intended or not. But according to this 2016 study here conducted by HP and that other organisation, there's about 41% of companies surveyed had been attacked or breached from the inside that they're aware of. A couple of different methods which an organisation might be attacked from inside. So number one, social posting, an employee revealing confidential information on a social networking site or even at a social event. And that could be as simple as doing a check-in somewhere, like I'm at a customer site and I've checked in at a location and now that my competitors know where I've been. It might be revealing that we've got this big deal that's coming up soon but don't tell anyone, and so forth. All kinds of different ways that information could hurt your organisation that way. Data theft, an employee stealing data on a device such as a USB key or leaking information to competitors. Again, there's a lot of other ways that could happen, particularly if you've got someone that is leaving the organisation. It might make sense for some employees to think, well, it might be handy for me to have a few things with me on my way out. So I might take a copy of some contracts that I know that are coming up and ending. I might take a copy of some forms and templates and proposal templates and all kinds of intellectual property in your organisation. If you've got extensive intellectual property in things such as just pick an example out of the air. If you're a surveyor and you've got standard templates you're using to do plans and designs, that would be a really good place to start for someone that's leaving your organisation that wants to start out on their own. Of course, unintentional breaches. Not everyone has bad intentions. They might just be tricked. We're all human. Pete went into some detail on that. Accidental loss of a laptop or a mobile device. We've had many years ago an incident where we had a laptop stolen out of an employee's car. Fortunately, we had data encryption on it, and we were able to do a remote wipe, etc. But absolutely, if you had a work laptop with a whole bunch of stuff on the desktop, or you're using Dropbox or OneDrive and you've got a copy of all your stuff on there, that would be something to think about if somebody's got a copy of that. Or a laptop that's disposed of, that's gone to e-recycling that has all your stuff on it. That'd be a pretty big concern, I think, too. So following on from that, there's about 51% of organisations, again, find out about those kind of breaches later on, particularly if you've had someone leave your organisation or suddenly your competitor has all kinds of good information about how you operate. Of course, threats come from externally, and this is generally where we'd expect, or we think of them as coming from. Hackers will go to great lengths to breach your cyber defences. They're very sophisticated and very clever. They can be in the form of that malware that we're talking about, automated attack bots. They could have a little automated bot that sits there chipping away at your website there for tens of hours or hundreds of hours if they think you're valuable enough, trying to guess your passwords. Particularly if you're a kind of website that processes financial transactions for your little online store or something there, they might be looking for a list of credit cards or transactions or customer names. Through malware and email phishing, of course, we all know about the email coming in that if you click on the attachment that you might be in trouble. And I guess the classic old hacking attempts, trying to log into your network or through your wireless or within your organisation connecting to your network some other way through a VPN or external access. And ransomware, so your hackers demanding payment, often using Bitcoin or some kind of other cryptocurrency in return for giving you access back to your data again. And of course, identity fraud's another big one, targeting consumers where they can copy your identity or clone their identity and pretend to be you, and using that they can go and purchase stuff from a supplier or send fake invoices out that look just like you and catch some money and take off and never be found again. All right, so what do we need to do? According to this body here, 80% of small businesses believe antivirus software alone needs to keep their business safe from cyber attacks. If there's one thing you take away from today, it's that having just AV software is not really enough, that the attacks will be very sophisticated, and there's lots of different ways those attacks are carried out, and they don't come in just looking like viruses. And even if you do get a crypto attack, there's a chance that it's fresh today. The antivirus doesn't know about it or isn't sophisticated enough to detect it. Other things we want to do, the number one thing I would think in terms of managing your risk is simply taking good backups, really good backups regularly, and keeping copies of those somewhere that you know that they're safe. Doesn't hurt to be a little bit more paranoid and have more than one backup either. No one's going to laugh at you for having 2 copies of your stuff in different places and protecting yourself. So if something does happen and there's a crypto event or something like that, you can just restore back and you've got your stuff. There might be no loss or very little loss there, so you don't have to go down that path of paying ransoms. Security updates, Pete talked about that, so I won't go on about that too much, but if you see something needs updating, do it. Your web browser's obvious. You're in Chrome and Chrome says an update, hit that update button. It only takes 30 seconds. Do your phones, do your PCs. Windows will make you do it eventually. If you leave your computer on overnight, it'll just restart. Macs will quite happily let you say, remind me tomorrow until the end of time. So don't be like me. Do more often updates on those. Ones that aren't so obvious are things within your organisation, particularly if you're a smaller business and you've got an internet router supplied by your ISP or one off the relatively inexpensive one off the shelf. Those things need updating too, but you won't see those things telling you constantly they need an update. So you've got to be on top of that or have some kind of IT team or some kind of arrangement to keep on top of those things. And that extends to wireless access points and to some extent even printers and Internet of Things devices as well. So you've got little widgets you attach to the network to do stuff around your organisation. At some point those things probably need updating or replacing. Biggest thing outside of the risk mitigation, the biggest active thing I believe that we can do is password management, which leads us to password managers. So the idea behind a password manager is it's a piece of software that you install on your device, whether it's a computer or a phone or a tablet. And inside that password manager, you choose one really, really good password that you've never used anywhere else and that nobody knows. And that's kind of your ultra secret password to unlock your vault of other passwords. And inside that password manager is where all your other passwords and configuration is stored for all the other sites and services that you access. So there's a whole variety of different password managers, a whole ecosystem out there of different ones that suit different people and different budgets with different features for individuals and for businesses. Generally speaking though, they got the same core set of features. Obviously they can store passwords, wouldn't be very useful otherwise. They can generate very good passwords for you. So if you're signing up for a service and you put your email address in and it says put your password in twice, you can ask your password manager to make you a ridiculously great password that nobody's ever going to guess or crack. And then you can put that in and it'll remember that so you can come back and use that as a reference later on. The ones that are even more clever, when you come back to that website, it'll just fill it in for you so you don't have to go to the trouble of remembering it or writing it on a post-it note or something. The passwords stored on your computer, obviously there's a concern about how secure are they, right? If someone gets to all my passwords, they've got my stuff anyway. They are encrypted using this thing, AES 256, which is a really tough encryption standard that the estimates are to take about 1 billion years of current computing to get through it. So if you're like me, you're not worth someone having 1 billion computers for 1 year to brute force that. There's certainly single user versions and there's multi-user versions for business that have different kinds of features. Most of them, this is really useful. This is probably the biggest feature out of the top, is the discovery, I'll touch the screen, discovery of vulnerable passwords. So they do exist out on the internet databases of passwords that have been leaked and found. So that when Pete showed you that graph of the vulnerabilities from Ashley Madison and those other ones, they're actually all out there on the internet and they're catalogued and what passwords and email addresses are being used. So the good password managers, if you put your password in, you put fluffy123, it'll come back and go, we've seen that password used in these released files of millions and millions of passwords, so don't use that one. So if you put your really complicated password in and it comes back and says that's been found somewhere, that's the time to stop using that password. And it also means that if your complicated password's used out on some website and it later on gets done, it'll notify you that it's been found to tell you to change it so that you've got definitely a unique password that's not in use somewhere else. Moving on to business password managers, it's important that if you're doing this on an organisational scale that you're not trying to use ones that are designed for individuals because there's a different feature set that you'll be looking for. Certainly you want to be able to disable employee access to the password manager when they're gone. If someone ends their employment, finishes up on Friday afternoon and goes home, you don't really want them being able to log into their password manager from home and download all their passwords and get to all the things you don't want them to. So you want to be able to centrally disable those so that they can't log in and do that. You can pre-configure access to sites without them ever knowing the password. So if you've got, as an organisation, you've got a sales team and you've got a whole bunch of people with access to be able to log into your supplier website and order parts, you can pre-configure passwords and save it into their password repository so they can go to the website and log in and they don't even know what their password is. So again, if you take that access away or they're leaving the organisation, you don't have to worry about them having access to things they shouldn't have access to. Of course, you can add existing passwords to things if you want. You don't have to let the password manager manage it. You can just use it as a repository. And you can set your password strength on those as well. So you might require, I'm sure we've all been through it, the uppercase, the lowercase, and a letter and a symbol and things like that. And you can also set up password sharing in these business level password managers. So you can share them individually or by a category. So again, if you've got your sales team and they all share a login, you can set it up that way so they've got access to log into it. Or if you've got multiple people posting as you on Instagram or something like that, you can manage it that way. So just a few things to consider. Again, without going over the top and being crazy, not every employee wants to hurt you on the way out the door, but you've got to protect your own interests, of course. When employees are leaving, understand there is a risk there. Even if today they leave on good terms, if they've got a whole bunch of your documents and stuff in the future, there might be reasons where that has some value. So just consider the possibility, that's all. What passwords do they know? All kinds of online services a typical employee would have access to. So there's online ordering systems with suppliers, vendors, partner logins, social media sites, accounting systems, probably dozens and dozens. And I think if most organisations sat down and wrote down a list of those kinds of things that people have access to, I think it'd be much longer than you'd initially think. Definitely have a well-documented process when people are leaving so that you've got a little checklist to go through and what kind of stuff do I need to deconfigure. I need to disable them in my password manager if I've got one of those. If they're logging into Xero or QuickBooks Online, I need to disable that stuff quickly. Disable or remove accounts from suppliers and etc. So, questions? Pete, come on down.
What's your favourite password manager? Which one do you like most?
Something like LastPass or 1Password is fine for personal use. For business, it's impossible for me to say because it's just different. There's $20 ones and $20,000 ones. It just depends on the organisation.
Building on Elisa's question, do you have a preferred methodology for multi-factor, like something like Authenticator or SMS?
Can you repeat the question for the online people?
Sorry, the question was, with two-factor authentication, do you mean is that...
So what would your preferred method be when you're using...
preferred method.
One, obviously suggesting that it gets used, and then two, like what?
Sure, so the preferred method of two-factor authentication. Look, I really think it comes down to what suits the organisation. Personally, I like texts, SMS messages coming to me. That makes a lot of sense. But some people like the security of a physical fob that, like you've seen with the banks have had in the past. I think a lot of them are going more digital now. I don't know that there's a ton of difference in the security between them. I think it's really whatever suits the organisation and what people will use.
Probably just to add to that one, what we are seeing is mobile phones are compromisable. You can actually get in the middle between them, you can take them over, you can put malware on the mobile phone. So getting an SMS used to be a really nice, safe and secure because we rely on telcos looking after that and doing that. And it's still very safe. So we at university still support SMS resets, but we're actually moving away to that, to one-time passwords, which is the little token, or have an authenticator app on your phone and you put it in and it's up there for a minute and you put in that code and you're good to go. So both are very better, they're far infinitely better than just having a username and password.
Yeah.
Those apps I've noticed the time delay can be problematic if you're using...
You just got to type quicker.
Oh no, but with if you have I don't know if it's a slow connection where I am or whatever the case, but I have an authenticator app that frequently times out before I have any chance to do anything with it.
And
I think the Maya one looks fine, but there's another one that I have that, yeah.
Some challenges there.
Yeah. And look, we haven't actually seen that. What tends to happen is the ones that we tend to use, or that I've certainly been using, it goes through a timer and it will time out, but then it does start the timer again and you can actually get the next code and put that in, because it's a mathematical algorithm in the background. So it actually, even though it's gone through and then started off again, you can actually use the second code as well.
I've actually seen that if it's a time difference between the computer and the device.
Oh, okay.
So, and it's got to be, I think there's like Microsoft Authenticator is like 3 minutes after it expires that it will then reject that one. So if you've got a time difference of greater than 3 minutes between the service you're trying to sign in with and it's fine in case of the reference and your authenticator as well as an issue.
Yeah, that's right. So different authentication methods, you might have a 5-minute window, and if their time or your time's drifted a little bit, it can definitely happen. And that's why multiple codes, like sometimes 2 or 3 sequence will work. As long as they're in that window, it'll let you in. Can Macs get viruses?
Perfect question.
There's not tons of them around, but they're not immune. So certainly for malware, I'd suggest that if you open something up that appears to be an attachment and it's actually a piece of software, there is protection built into the OS for it, but if you click yes enough times, you can open that thing, and that can be a problem. At the moment, it's not a massive target simply because the volume of Macs around aren't enormous compared to Windows, I should say. So at the moment, it's not a huge problem, but that could change any day. There could be a 0-day exploit coming out tomorrow that affects 100 million Macs tomorrow, and everybody's opinion changes. So I guess in terms of Mac choice with a lot of our customers, we're not insisting that everyone have that. Certainly our business customers will usually have a layer on there anyway. If they've got whether they've got Macs or PCs, will have some kind of product to protect it. More so the protection it's multi-level, right? So having a bit of software on there is great, but you've also got to have some kind of email filtering to block that stuff. And if you're on Office 365 or Google Apps, you've got something at least. And then the training of the employees. So there's this multi-level approach to it anyway that regardless of your OS, those things all need to be addressed. But not a lot of viruses out there for Macs, which isn't to say don't worry about it at all, I guess. Yeah. Yep.
I use Face ID on my iPad. How is that?
Yep. So Face ID on iPad. Apple say that it's about a 1 in a million chance, I think, of someone not you being able to get in. And if they're a family member, I think that comes down to I'm sure someone else will correct me, but it's something like 1 in 10,000 because they'll potentially share some facial features. So it's not terrible. It's okay to have on. I wouldn't go to a hacker convention and leave it out on the table though. So
Because everybody will pick it up.
Everybody will give it. So I wouldn't use it as my sole security to have all my stuff on. I'd still think about the physical security as well. Well, someone will pinch your iPad anyway if you leave it laying around. But it's pretty good, but I wouldn't say it's foolproof.
And certainly, as technology develops, I suspect the conversations that we're having today about usernames and passwords will go away. Biometrics will eventually take over, and we won't have to worry about having conversations around passwords anymore. The technology will be there, and with the encryption will be there to support a much more seamless experience. I think just touching on what Paul said too, awareness for the people within your business, and having those conversations and have training and awareness training is really critical. We weren't kidding. You'll notice that both of us talked about insiders as being a huge threat. I think I'm recalling stats now as I have a presentation with our council or our board in a week exactly about insider threats, and the percentages are like 33% unintentional from data breaches. If you look at 100% data breaches, 33% go to insiders, so these are your staff that accidentally do something wrong, click on a link. Another 25-ish percentage is they haven't followed a process or a procedure, or they haven't followed the training that's been provided to them and they've made a mistake through that. And then a very small percentage is malicious. Somebody's left on bad terms and they want to actually cause some damage to you. And then the others is really about, this is what causes data breaches. And the other is about technology, is about supply chains. So if you partner with somebody to give you service and they give you a log on or they connect to your systems, your responsibility doesn't move just because you've got a partner to do some of that work for you. The data is your data, the government holds you responsible for that. So if they have a compromise and they can get in, that's kind of where that other fits in, so that other 30% sits in the other bracket. So if you just look at the percentages, over half of those are people inside your business that could be causing the data breach.
Just one other thing, web browsers. Firefox has introduced DOH.
Yep.
Yes, HTTPS. More secure. Any thoughts on that?
Look, if you talk to Paul and I, and I'm responsible for a large enterprise, we might have different responses. Do I think HTTP, so what we're talking about for those of you who are not 100% sure, currently DNS is the way we connect to everything in the world online, every internet server out there. Every website we visit, you use a domain name resolution service. So you send out a name, it converts it into an IP address. That IP address is actually the literal physical location anywhere in the world of this web server where that application will be. So that's what we're talking about, and one of the changes that we're seeing being discussed for a few years now, but we're seeing Firefox implement their version of it. Microsoft and Google are doing it a different way. I like Microsoft and Google's way of doing it, and I'll tell you why in a sec. So what we're actually talking about is taking, at the moment, this domain service it sits at our high-level telco, so the Telstra of the world holds it for Australia, and then it's a hierarchical model. So within an organisation, CQU runs its own domain servers. All your ISPs have their own domain servers. They point upstream to Telstra. Telstra point upstream to your national providers, and on it goes up to the level. So what they're talking about doing, instead of actually having it hard-coded into each client, either physically written in or you get it from your ISP, it tells that client which domain server to use. So what we're talking about now is throwing that all out the window and moving to a model where we do DNS over the web. So it's over a HTTPS connection. That's secure. I actually think that's the future, to be honest. I think that's where we'll all be going that way. The implementation of how we do that. So one of the things that Firefox have done is they've said, don't really care what everyone wants to do. We're going to make this upstream. We're going to point to Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a large, very large internet service that most software, or a lot of software, so if you're getting patches, you're getting applications, they actually provide that and deliver that content. So they're a large content provider on the internet, very large, huge, massive. So what Firefox have done, whether it's been a partnership directly with them, or I don't really know the real intent, Paul may know, but they've partnered with them and said, well, we don't care what everybody does, we're going to point all Firefox web browsers to Cloudflare for their DNS service. What Microsoft have done and said, well, that's great, but what we would do is we'll refer that back to the organisation. The organisation can make that recommendation on where they send it to. So I'm not that comfortable with that model.
It's been rolled out in the US.
Yes, and it'll be here in Australia, I think, in the next 2 to 4 weeks. I think I saw a timeline for that. So if you're a Firefox user, the risk is for us, a large organisation. So we have a lot of internal web services that are up and running, and we have web services, so we would expect our staff and students to be able to connect to those internal servers that are working. So immediately, if we go through our more automatic upgrade process for Firefox, and then they refer it to Cloudflare, Cloudflare doesn't know about any of those internal web services because we don't host them on the internet. They're internal only. That means anybody using a Firefox browser is trying to get to those, they're going to fail. They're just going to say these don't exist anymore because they've got to go out to another source to find out where they live. So the Microsoft and Google solution is to say, all right, if you're in an organisation, check to see what the local settings say, and then then that will be fine for us. So that's the risk.
And you're sending out the names of your servers externally as well, so you might have payroll.cq.edu or something that's inside only, and you just sent that out.
Yeah, and we were not prepared to do that because you're just going to, hey, come and hack this is our payroll server.
Any other questions?
Look at a Dropbox business account for a business. How
Yep.
safe is Dropbox?
Yep. So Dropbox for Business, in my opinion, full disclosure, I'm a Dropbox partner. I'm a partner because I think it's a good product. So
you probably really want to hear my response.
ask Pete. Look, your access to it is secured. It's over SSL, so in terms of copying stuff to them and from them, that's fine, I believe. They do heavily encrypt the data, and it's encrypted not only while it's in transit, but it's encrypted on disk on their end. And when you set up your group, your tenancy inside Dropbox, you choose a security key. And that's interesting because it means that Dropbox themselves can't really see your stuff even. So it's encrypted on their end, and it's just a big blob of stuff. And the only way to unlock that is one of your, to log in using your login or your client to access that data. Having said that, because it's cloud-based, and it's not to knock Dropbox, but because it's a cloud-based thing, we don't really know what they're doing on that end and what copies they've got, and that's all their intellectual property, how they back it up and secure it and what they're doing. So there is a risk, I suppose, in not knowing. But insofar as they're a big organisation and you can trust big organisations, even as I'm saying that, I realise that's ridiculous, yeah. So insofar as you can trust those big organisations, it's not at the moment a terrible choice when compared to other cloud storage providers. My stuff's in it, I guess, until it isn't. So I don't know what would change that. What's your view, Pete?
I think Dropbox and all those file servers are an awesome way to keep people working, and especially in a mobile way. I'm particularly not a big fan of Dropbox. One of the challenges we've had with it is conforming to government regulations around keeping our data in country.
So good news for you.
Yeah, so this is...
that changed about 4 months ago.
Yeah. So when we made our decision, we're an Office 365 university, so we support OneDrive. OneDrive does a very similar kind of model for us. It gets very difficult if you're an organisation trying to support many different file syncing services. So we have a different file syncing service for our researchers, and it's very secure and all on private infrastructure. That we don't actually manage that either, but our ISP does. And we've made the decision because of the integration with Office 365 and just how much easier that works for us. So we're not a Dropbox organisation, but as Paul said, providing you've actually paying money, you've got the business accounts rather than the freebie versions, then they're all much better than the way people have done.
Yeah, if your Dropbox was set up before about March, you may be offshore, and you can request to have that moved, and it just sort of happens in the background. I don't think, Brent, do you know if they've done them all yet? Or?
They haven't done them all.
Yeah, they haven't done the moves unless you ask, but you can just request it, and it'll just get shifted into Australia if you want that.
Since I think July, August, have been on the Australian licenses, but it's quite easy to request them to Australia.
Yeah.
They haven't made it clear as to whether they are going to automatically move once they've got that initial rush of the request done, whether they're just going to move once they know from Australian tenants.
But there are other implications of Dropbox as well, particularly around talking about accidental sharing of stuff. You can control, so you can create groups within Dropbox so you can place your data in different areas for different working groups. You can control whether that can be shared or not within those groups. So we're very tight on that. Most of our areas that we keep our stuff in, we don't allow it to be shared to the internet. And we've just got a very specific area that you can put stuff in and hit share and give someone a link. Because obviously if someone makes a mistake and shares your whole folder full of stuff and here's the link, and anyone with that link, unless you've secured it, can get access to that. So there needs to be, again, some controls around how you manage that and what people can do and what they can't do. So it takes a little bit of effort to understand what options you've got.
I guess probably the other thing to say about it, it's a far, this might sound a little bit controversial to you, but it's a far better way to share confidential and secure documents with directly with people rather than sending it via email.
Yeah.
So that's the other advantage of any of the file syncing apps, because they're secure at rest when the documents are just sitting there doing nothing. They're also secure because there's an encryption between where they are and to the client machine. You can't control anything once somebody's got access to it and they can see it and do whatever they want to it. But while it's in that thing, you can be very specific about it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, only the top tier of Dropbox has full audit logging. I wish they'd push that back into all editions so that if you've got a doubt, you can go and look at, if you've had an employee leave and they've copied 60,000 files or something, you can see that. Most of the editions, unfortunately, you can't see that. And the reality is too that I guess the scarier thing with technology like this is they're licensed. So you pay for it per login, per license. So lots of organisations, they just share them. So they might have 6 or 8 or however many people using one login. And if someone nicks or you shares it and copies it somewhere, you don't know. So a lot to unpack and discuss. That's probably a big topic. Yeah.
Just very quickly, can you give us a few tips? I mean, you get those awful emails that come through. We get you come through and trying to take your money and leave. What are some of the tips and what we should look for? Anything in particular that should spark?
I guess the principles are don't ever pay anyone unless they're already set up in your finance system. So if you've got a customer or supplier, whenever money's changing hands, have some kind of form to fill out with the email address where invoices go to and what the bank account is, and don't ever change that unless another form's filled out and it's come from where it's meant to be. Because you're really vulnerable if you just get an email that looks just like someone and says, oh, we've just moved banks, and we're now with the bank of whatever, and here's the new details, and you start paying bills, and you send a big one there, you'll never see those guys again. So have a process definitely around how you manage payment of suppliers. So if you're getting email stuff come in telling you to redirect stuff or to change any sort of details, just ignore those. Or probably report those. I should have done maybe a slide on how to report that stuff. If it's a PDF in general and you don't recognise it and you think it's suspect, just hit the delete button and empty it straight away. I mean, I'd delete a couple probably a day, even though I might get the occasional legit one. If it's a pamphlet from a supplier and it's in PDF, there's every chance I'm never going to see it. I'm not opening it.
And look, you can pay a lot of money for spam filtering with email providers, whether you buy your own product or pay for it as an additional to your email providers. But there's no guarantee that stuff still does get around filters. And I think probably the final recommendation on that one is Elise will never send you an email asking you to buy iTunes cards.
No, we do send a lot of emails at the Smarter, thanks to Courtney, but no, we won't send any links to buy anything. Any other questions? One last question, and then we'll wrap it up.
I get a lot of update reminders from software I don't recognise. Is that valid?
From software you don't recognise?
Yeah. Like things that are asking me to update, and I do not recognise that software.
I think you're actually asking exactly the right question. You're already thinking, this is stuff I don't know about. Don't do it. It's that simple.
I entrusted, when I bought my laptop, I entrusted the person who sold it to me to everything that I needed necessary to be secure on that computer. And for the life of me, I couldn't remember the names of those programs, but the ones that pop up regularly, I assume he did it intentionally, but occasionally things just pop up and I'm like, oh.
Yeah, if you've bought a notebook from a big name brand, HP or Lenovo or something like that, there's every chance there's all kinds of stuff pre-installed on it for managing.
That's what I could be seeing. I could be seeing.
Could be update managers and things that want to do VoIP stuff, and 36 things on there that want to update. If there's any doubt, just hit no, uninstall it.
So what should she do? She should come and see you and ask. Like, what do you do? If some things are preloaded on your computer and it wants to update?
Paul's right. I mean, one of the things that typically happens, especially with small business, what we want to do is go down to Harvey Norman at JB Hi-Fi and buy whatever we can see on special. We've got a new staff member starting tomorrow. That's the easiest, quickest way to get them going. When you do that, the vendors actually make money, and I'll tell you how I know this, because we've actually got a contract with the Dells and the HPs of the world to supply us with clean skin laptops and desktops. Nothing installed, just the operating system. And they charge us an extra $12 per machine for that. To have nothing on there other than their operating system. So they clearly get paid a lot of money and a lot of incentives to put all that I've got to call it malware, but it's not really malware.
Well, Lenovo had a couple of years ago. Lenovo got sprung for actually having legitimate malware on their pre-installed machine.
I teach Windows 10 at the library, and we charge a one. There is a reset this PC option when you buy it, and it just gives you a base model up-to-date Windows 10 current edition.
That's good advice.
So you'll sometimes see it pop up and it'll be, do you want to update 123 XYZ dot whatever thing? I'd go and jump into Google and try and find out what that is. And there's no guarantee, but you might go, oh yeah, that's right, that's my digital camera thing or whatever, and you can make a call then on whether you want to hit update or just keep hitting no.
Peter, Paul, thank you so much for coming along and for sharing your knowledge.
No problem at all.
To say thank you.
Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.